and shine, for your light has come, and the glory of God is shining on you. Arise and shine, arise and shine, for your light has come, for your light has come.
Hi, I'm Edgar, one of the co-founders of Freedom Farm Community.
And I'm Ann Rader. I also co-founded Freedom Farm Community in Middletown, New York in 2004.
2004.
And we moved here from the Bronx in 2005, not knowing anything about farming really. So it's been a huge adventure these past 15 years.
Yeah. And we bought the land together with Ann's brother and his family and their parents. So it was a collective thing. And I think that's the way to go. People buying in together as a community, and that would make it easier to afford land that has been so inaccessible to people who want to grow but can't grow.
And when we were living in the Bronx, I was working at Youth Ministries for Peace and Justice, and Edgar was volunteering there. And so they were the first group of young people that came here to the farm in 2004, before we had even moved here full time. So now the young people that we worked with are in their 30s, and they've come back to visit since. But since then, Youth Ministry has still come and visited, and also we've met some young people from Middletown, from the Cornell Cooperative Extension Program, and then discovered that just 10 miles away there's Camp Deer Park, where that works. It's a Mennonite camp that's owned by all the Mennonite churches in New York City. So we get to work with young people and young adults from Camp Deer Park. So that's a great connection. Because Freedom Farm, the main thing we're doing is growing food in a sustainable way to share with people who don't have access to food, and also do youth and young adult ministry through sustainable agriculture mostly. So, and sometimes we'll compare, use the land and things that you need to do the land and compare them to our lives. Like, what seeds do you want to plant in your life? When we plant seeds, we've done kind of what weeds or things that are getting in the way do you want to take out? When we build trellises, or for the tomatoes, or stake things up, what kind of support systems do you need in your life? And then harvesting, is a way to what are the fruits that you're discovering in your journey? What can you share? What ways can you share with others? And then, serving. How do you share the fruit and the harvest in your life with other people?
You serve. That's the part of sharing, and giving back, and teach them about compost, how it's a cycle, a circle of life, from seed to growth to harvest to decay, death, and returning back to the soil. The same thing, and what Ann was talking about is our curriculum. What we've done in the past. We haven't used it in a while. Because the young people came for the day, and so we had a long day to work with them. Now young people we're the discipleship crew from Camp Deer Park.
Last year with COVID, it was the young adults who worked there,
right?
And you talked
right. We just do it in a different way, right? Yeah, it was more food justice,
where our food comes from.
Understanding where our food comes from, and how can we, and I had cards where it showed the length of the food chain from seed to plate, how they go from the farmer, growing it to when it comes to your plate, and production, distribution, and how can we reduce that, the mainstream scale? How can we reduce that to a scale like this? And they showed, well, You go in, you pick it, you eat it, you put it on the plate, you're done. Or if you don't have access to a farm, if you're not working on a farm, if you go to a farmer's market, you go, they do that short distance, but instead of going to the farmer's plate, it goes to your plate. But the distance between the mainstream um, chain of events that occur is much shorter. Um, you have to shorten that, and there's less gas involved, less oil involved, less need for war involved. It's all, and help them to see that it's all connected. How is this connecting to your life? Um, yeah.
Also, we're working with a group called Radical Living, and that's an urban garden in Brooklyn. So they come, and you also did an exercise where you learned about different food, like you had pictures of different foods and the ingredients in them, and where you have access to different kinds of food. Remember, like
Right, but that was the showing them what's in your grocery stores from the communities that you're from, predominantly African American, versus a community which is predominantly white that has Whole Foods and Trader Joe's, and helping them to see. So I had a picture of the product, and on the reverse side had the picture of the ingredients, versus the storefront churches that the corner store, grocery store, or even supermarkets, and showing the difference between what goes in the ingredients of, of one neighborhood to the next. But my main purpose for them to understand, because you can have junk food in the same Chips Ahoy cookies, and a neighborhood that has a higher income than yours, but what they have is a choice. They can choose to get the Chips Ahoy, or they can choose to get the organic,
lower sugar,
lower sugar, or using cane sugar versus high
ingredients.
fructose corn syrup. A community of color that might be living in a low income area, they don't have that choice. And helping them to see that and understand that, what kind of choices you can make with the money that you have. Going to make what are the do you have healthy food in your neighborhood? Do you have McDonald's, Kentucky Fried Chicken, Burger King, and what's the radius of within a number of blocks, and what's in their grocery stores? How many healthy foods, fruits and vegetables? What are the pricing? Can you afford those? And what would you choose with the money that you have? And the pricing of, let's say, organic produce is high. Why? It's more of a niche thing, but the prices have to come down for people to afford it. And this is why we give it away to people who don't have access, who can't afford it. Yes, it's a lot of work for us. Um, yes, we're trying to work to figure out how to um, uh, maintain the number of bugs without using pesticides and herbicides, because that affects the earth, that affects our water system, that affects our bodies because we're taking that stuff in. How do we not use those and still grow healthy food? And that's teaching young people who are coming through about sustainable, and interns. When we say young people, it's junior high school, but it's also the interns that come and live with us. They come to learn about sustainable agriculture. They also come to learn about living in Christian community, and um, and how to work with young people as well. And we are our foundationally, we are a Christian based community, and that's that sustains us, that supplies us, that's our building block, that we are Christ centered. But it doesn't mean everyone who comes has to be Christian, but it means how we live, how we serve, how we go about doing the things that we do is Christ centered. So we are free to be and love non-Christians, Muslims, Buddhists, Jewish people. Yeah, it's not, and
Atheists.
it's not an exclusive
Mm-hmm.
relationship. 'Cause I don't like to say religion. It's not an exclusive relationship. It's an inclusive relationship. Even though our foundation, our work, and our going out and doing things is Christian based.
Well, and our understanding of what it means to be Christian is that you do welcome everyone.
Correct.
Just like, there's the story of the Good Samaritan that Jesus tells, and he picks a Samaritan who's a person from mixed religious background that a lot of his folks in his community look down upon.
Mm-hmm.
And he chose that person to be the example of the one who had compassion.
Right.
So the priest and the Levite, they walked by this person who had been beaten, but the Samaritan took care of him, bandaged him, gave him oil, put him up in a place.
Mm-hmm.
And Jesus uplifts that behavior as.
Right,
So
and he asked who has more compassion, and they knew the Samaritan. He said, "Well, go and do likewise." This is, and when you look at the Matthew 25 verse of the sheep and the goats, and he said, enter the sheep enters, who fed the hungry, clothed the naked, visited the people in prison, visit the sick, people who've done things in the service of others, versus those who talk the talk but don't walk the walk, so to speak. And that's what Jesus has called us to do. And our wedding, and at our wedding, we chose Isaiah 58, where God says, they're fasting. The Jewish people are fasting, but they're fasting, to show off or to do the wrong things during their fast. But God said, this is not what I want. What is the fast that I choose? Clothe the naked, feed the hungry, visit the sick and in prison, let the oppressed go free. That's that's directly in line with what Jesus was saying to the Israelites, to the Jews, what God was saying to the Israelites. This is what I'm looking for: service to others, and that's our foundation. That's the why we do what we do. The how is always the complicated. The how.
So when we first got here, I was outside in the yard with my sister-in-law, and I think Josiah was about 1, and Joel was 2, and we hadn't even moved here full time. And a guy in a black truck drives up, and he says, and I asked, "Did Ben call you, my brother?" I already was.
Yeah, we already had.
And then
we're wondering before we moved up, what will the neighbors think of what we want to do? Bring young people out of the city and work with them on the farm.
And he's a big guy, and he gets out of his truck, and he's kind of like, "So what do you want to do with this land?" And I was nervous. I was like, "Oh no, he's not gonna like that. We're bringing young people from the city. He might not even like us."
As an interracial couple,
right? And with
what are the neighbors in the rural country like?
I had all these stereotypes about rural folks, and I said, "Well, just come inside and meet our family." So we introduced him to mom and dad and everybody, and we said, we described what we wanted to do. We want to share this land. We want to do ministry here, and we want to bring young people that we're working with to learn on the land, learn about God, learn about growing food. And he got so excited, he went home and he got his wife and his daughter, and they brought back all these flowers, and he said, "Don't buy any equipment." So even though, we come from really different backgrounds and probably have different theology and different politics, we found common ground, in the spirit, I would say.
Right.
And so a few years later, they started, he had a 2,000 head dairy farm that he gave up because it was really stressful on his family. And when we met them, they weren't doing dairy farming, but a few years later, they decided to start again. And these are their cows. They started Freedom Hill Farm, and we worked together. So their cows graze on the land, and we get lots of great manure and milk, and young people go over and visit the dairy. So it's been a real blessing. Yeah, and good partnership.
Yeah, as part of our as part of the time when the young people come, we walk over through the woods. It's probably like a 5-minute walk, and we showed them, how milk is produced.
They've seen a cow be born.
Yeah, one time, and we put milk in a jar, the cream in a jar, and we skim the milk because it's raw milk that they sell.
So the cream flows to the top.
And we shake it to make butter, and they see how butter is made, and we put it on crackers. We also use the cream to make ice cream. To help them see, hey, this is how ice cream is made, natural ice cream, not all that junk that's in. I don't even call it ice cream anymore. It's just hard to call it ice cream. I don't know what that stuff is. But they see, oh, this is how you make ice cream. All you need is 5 or 4 ingredients to make ice cream, and that is really good, delicious, and it quenches your summer thirst. And we've gone so far away from what natural is. They use natural as a buzzword, but the things that we eat, the things that you get at the store is full of high fructose corn syrup, and everything is GMO corn, and they overproduce so much corn they have to change it to something else, so they chemicalize the corn into high fructose corn syrup. So that's in pretty much everything. And how do you move away from that? And I think the best way to move away from that is to grow your own food, or connect with a farmer who's growing through the farmer's market, or have a direct connection to a farm, or through shares of a CSA. That's the way to get away from the madness that we've created, and that we've capitulated our food system, our water quality, our air quality. We've just given it all up for agribusiness and big business, and we're just in a mess. And the world is showing it. It's showing signs of distress. So how do we get back to where we need to be? We slowly connecting with other people, connecting with farms, creating shares where you can purchase land if you can't do it on your own, and growing food in the community. A family just moved in with us that has taken the plunge to live in Christian community. How does that? What does that look like? How do you do that? And it's we do it day by day, but we have to make sure we communicate. What are our needs? What went well? What went bad? So it's a movement, a growth in progress, and we move as long as we're moving along together, communicating. I think we can reach that place where we can get back to some semblance of where we ought to be as a community, as a country, as a world.
I think the local foods movement is taking off now.
It is.
Thankfully, even at the dairy farm, now they're selling, a young woman, Stephanie, started a farm store, and she's getting local food from lots of different farmers. And there's another young woman, Trish Sweetman, in town who started the Farmer's Daughter. So it's pretty exciting. People are bringing local honey and jam and soap and, chicken and
Pickles,
eggs.
So lots of eggs.
Little by little, one community at a time, I think it's kind of taking off. And people are excited about supporting local. And and here here's Teo the dog. He's a great farm dog. Helps scare off the bunnies and the groundhogs.
Deer.
He's a rescue dog.
Yes.
So lots of challenges with growing food, even though it's still worth it. But you can help speak to that. I mean, I mentioned Teo helps with the critters. There's lots of things that try to eat your food. All kinds of bugs, flea beetles, bunnies, groundhogs. moles, deer. Yeah. Those are big challenges to protect your food. And then there's also, I was mentioning, just especially if you're trying to make ends meet from growing food, it's very hard to compete with the global market. Like the price of a cucumber or whatever in a large store like Walmart or something is so cheap, and it's never going to add up to the amount the labor and the cost of growing. So that's definitely a difficulty.
And
And getting access to land too. That's not
that's the
property
biggest
taxes.
impediment is acquiring the property. You have to have the capital to do so. But I think what people aren't seeing is that you can, through cooperative economics, pool your money with others to build community, to grow. To purchase land.
Yeah.
And what and finding that the people who are giving the grants who are into this idea of building small communities of farmers around the country, if you can access those people as well, that will ease the burden of seeking funds on your own to grow to purchase land.
Sometimes the zoning can be tricky. Like if it might be just zoned for one family, so that's something we didn't foresee.
Yes, and we're in this area, the Northeast Farmers of Color. We're a part of that coalition, and one farmer did say they did not know the community and the impediment of the racism in the area that they did not know about, and the trouble that they're going through. We're blessed that we're not going through that, but knowing where others are that you can build community with, and not on the farm, on the land, but in the area. How can you let people understand what you are trying to do, and build connections and communities and network that way? Because by yourself it's hard, but as a collective, as a group, you can. It eases the burden of fighting alone.
Mm-hmm.
Koinonia, which was Koinonia Farms out in Americus, Georgia. Clarence Jordan began that idea of blacks and whites working together and on a farm, which was unheard of in the 40s. This is pre-civil rights movement. And so they got together as a Christian farm, and the town did not like that. So they had to face shootings into the farm, bombings, boycott. They would not. The town would not sell them the things that they needed to keep the farm moving. So what they decided to do is have reach out to the extended community who knew about Koinonia, who supported Koinonia, and they send check donations for them to keep going. And so they received the goods that they needed through mail order. And when the pecan trees aged enough, they sold pecans through mail order. And they sold things through mail order, which helped, but they sold it to the community who was outside of the physicality of the farm. So networking and reaching out to people and connecting with people is a way of not fighting alone, because we're not in this fight alone.
Yeah. I mean, I think our kids have faced some, just being minorities, have faced racism in school and at the park somehow. I mean, sometimes, but thankfully nothing really horrible has happened directly to us. I think some other So there've been some incidents in the schools that around here that have been hard, and people are we're working on it. I think the churches and schools want to learn what they can do to change, but it's a slow process, and they need to. I mean, they're hopefully like the board will change, but it's something that takes time and effort and communication, and is important.
It's important for us to understand that this is not our land. Um, this is not our ministry. We're doing the work that Christ has called us to do, and so when we plant the seed, it's very important to give thanks and to pray and to give reverence to God for the seed, for the soil, um, for the water. When we pray for water, we pray for rain. When it doesn't rain, we are not in control. It's not about us. We're going to be gone, and who knows how many years, and we would hope that God would continue the ministry because it's not our ministry. So every seed, we were thankful for every seed. We're thankful for every plant, and we're thankful for every fruit that comes from that plant, and we're thankful that we were called to be stewards of this land, to go out and pick fruit and share it with someone who needs it, and who deserves it. Who deserves wholesome, fresh produce. It's a right. It is a God-given right, but we would hope that um, the world would understand that food is a God-given right for everyone.
You've been preaching lately about, or including in some of your sermons, about the doctrine of discovery. When was it?
Was it 1057 or 1097? I always forget the first papal bull that was written by the Pope, the Christian Pope, who's supposed to espouse love of neighbor, love of everyone, but he wrote these papal bulls which allowed him and other papal bulls were written by other popes throughout history that allowed Spain, that allowed Portugal to go out and discover lands that were occupied by human beings, and if they weren't Christian, that it belonged to Portugal, it belonged to Spain, the people belonged to Portugal, the people belonged to Spain, the people in Africa belonged to them. So in dehumanizing, they took and took and took. And the essence of those papal bulls, of that doctrine of discovery, was incorporated in America, and through the Supreme Court, and it was allowed. The U.S. government was allowed to take away native land, and the natives were told, you don't own this land, you don't have sovereign right to this land, and we have it because we are the U.S. government, and we can take it and do whatever we want with it. So you had Andrew Jackson come in as president, and he asked Congress to help him with the Indian Removal Act that was passed. So Georgia, the Carolinas, Florida, Alabama, Tennessee, all those southeastern lands where that was had a heavy Native American population. They said, you have to go. We want this land. The white farmers wanted that land, so they passed the Indian Removal Act. Told them they had to go.
Agribusiness plantations.
And you had the Trail of Tears, where they were forced to Oklahoma. In come the right, the God-given right to take a human being from Africa, call them a slave, and say, you have to work this land now because it was fertile land for cotton. That history that story is intertwined. The Native American story and the African American story is intertwined. So once they removed the Native Americans, they brought in the African Americans, and and the story that was built throughout history, American history. And we were just learning about the Tulsa Race Massacre of 1921. All those folks that were forced into Oklahoma, they built up Tulsa, and through once Oklahoma became a state, they were forced out of there. They had rich uh, uh, tar sands land, so the oil. Hey, this is good land. We want it. Forget that treaty. You're out. So Native Americans were pushed out of Oklahoma, and the African Americans who were free. They built up Greenwood, and it became Black Wall Street, and we know the history of what happened to Black Wall Street, and more land, more space, that wealth that was taken away. It's just a constant taken away, and repression of history, because everyone's learning about this now. Everyone's learning about the Juneteenth now. Like, not everyone, but most people didn't know about Juneteenth. I didn't know about Juneteenth until my adulthood. I didn't know about uh, the Tulsa Race Massacre, until two years ago. That's a repression of history. So I think that truth is rising, and as Christians we have to rise with it. If we consider Christ to be truth and Christ to be love, we have to rise with it. We have to speak truth, that God created land for everyone, and that's why I say it's a God-given right to food. Food is a God-given right. Clean air is a God-given right. Clean water. We have in Michigan, they're having trouble with water in Flint, Michigan. That's a God-given right. There shouldn't be a control. Water shouldn't be controlled. Air shouldn't be controlled. It's so we everything's upside down. So I think truth is rising to right the wrongs of history, and we have to decide what side we want to be. Do we want to be on the side of truth, or do we want to be on the side of the upside down history? And that's the why we do what we do.
And when you farm, you see the generosity of, look how many seeds come out of one fruit, and how many fruits come out of one seed. So it's meant to be shared,
Yep.
and the earth is meant to be shared.
When thinking about doing community with others, you have to decide what type of community you want to and how you want your community to be governed, loosely. We had decided that our community would, I would work outside the community. So I worked for the New York City Fire Department for 20 years. Now it's my first year of retirement. And that's a blessing from God that I was able to do that and do the farm at the same time. But now I'm a commission ruling elder candidate, and so I do a lot of preaching at different Presbyterian churches around the Hudson River Presbytery. And one of my main focuses is get back to love. God is love, and preaching love, and that we should love one another as God loves us, and to help people to understand the evil of racism, and how love can uproot racism in the church, which began in the church with the papal bulls. So I feel that has to be dismantled, uprooted, and destroyed, and put left for the compost heap. Through the Christian church, and Christians have to understand the history and understand what's needed what we have to do, uprooting whatever it is in ourselves, because that's how it trickled down into society, and it trickled down into our bodies and our spirits, and it has to be uprooted, and thrown. It's probably, like Jesus said, it's not even fit for the manure pile. Racism is not even fit for the manure pile. It has to be stripped away from, in every form that it has manifested into. Greens will be over here.
This section will
crop
move to this one. Mm-hmm.
In section 4.
Yep. We just got a grant with Will and Sarah, and we're sharing it with families from this organization called Proyecto Faro, which is immigrant families that they started an organization and they help distribute it. And then we also share it with families from Camp Deer Park. They're mostly like African Honduran families from New York City, and also African American from Mennonite churches. Sometimes young people will come and harvest and take it back to their community. Also, we share it with the local food bank at our church. Otisville Presbyterian has a food bank, food pantry. So, and then also sometimes Cornell Cooperative Extension, they have a cleaning a truck that will take it and distribute it to social service organizations in the area. So like halfway houses,
or the
shelters, pantries. Yeah, in the local community. So it's a little bit of a mixture. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then we eat it and share it.
Well, hi, my name is Will Summers, and I'm a farmer. Just moved here to Freedom Farm. And yeah, I've been farming for several years at this point, and I'm always, aiming to farm in a way that's ecologically sustainable, starting with the soil, caring for soils. Healthy soils can make healthy plants, which can feed healthy people. And so that's sort of the way that I've kind of always approached things, organic methods, but have rarely worked in any place that's like a certified organic farm, if ever. and just, things that are, I know that there's terms out there like regenerative, and those are things that, I'm drawn to, sustainability, regeneration, healthy, and I'm a practicing Christian, and was raised in the Christian faith, and have kind of found my own way as an adult. And a big part of, I think that kind of what I'm doing and how I approach farming is connects to my faith in some ways that where I think about Christianity as like this a religious practice that is based so much on relationships. I think about the relationship between, like what people call, God and Jesus, that, and the Holy Spirit, and this idea of a Trinity and the relationship between those three things, and particularly the idea of like Jesus as a person, who was, sent by God to be a manifestation of God on earth in relationship with people and, all of creation, thinking about, that, creator and son, relationship. And so that plays into my mind with farming of like, what are, what kind of relationships, what kind of relationship do I have with the land, and what does it mean to be, thinking about, like a relationship with the land, seasonal changes, even, like topography and microclimates within a farming system, and getting to know those places and understanding, that I think that those things are interwoven to me with my faith practice and my farming practice. Like, what kind of relationship am I in with, these other living things, and what is, something that allows for, for all of us to thrive, trying to think of some of the catchphrases that I think of about that, but there's one from Robin Wall Kimmerer that is, I'm trying to think of it, it's all flourishing is mutual, right? And so like that's the kind of thing that like, when I think about the connects, like the faith practice and my farming. When I think about sort of like large scale agriculture, like what has become, like commercial, or like even like, like what does the word traditional even mean anymore? But those kind of practices, I mean, what concerns me the most is, I mean, the monoculture of, just like acres and acres, I mean, like thousands of, of acres of one crop, and, maybe a crop rotation of one thing and another thing, and, just back and forth between two things just does not seem, that's the kind of thing that doesn't really seem to be in line with, you know, yeah, like, like even my faith practice of like where, like the diversity of thought and people, the diversity of living things is so critical to an environment that flourishes. All of the, like the poisons, the chemicals, a lot of that stuff is, was developed, after, in collaboration, or, in conjunction with wars that were being fought, right? And so that kind of violence that was enacted on people is now being enacted on land, and the soils, and all the living organisms in the soils. And so those kinds of practices are, yeah, I find, incredibly dangerous. And that's exactly what this kind of, practice is in opposition to. And, I think that sort of this, like being part of, living here and working on this farm is just, part of a network and fabric of many other places that are, I know that, in this region and across lands that, where people are, creating resistance to that kind of thing. And the resilience that these kind of farms and the healing that these kind of farms offer is, yeah, it is critical for, with we know all the other stuff that's going on in the world with agriculture, for sure.